This is a comic review of Tales to Astonish. Now this is issue 57, and issue 57 was just a bit before the changes were going to happen. Obviously we had the Hulk and the Submariner took over Tales to Astonish. This is when Giant Man was still here. I really like Giant Man and Wasp. Personally, I thought the Wasp was the better character. Giant Man I always felt was an annoying character. This one is a very scribbled over, tatty, really battered issue. I got this from a friend who just gave and said, you really like this because you love Giant Man and Wasp. And he's right, it's a great little story. Daft as they were all daft. And I enjoyed the Marvel Epic collection that included these stories. Sadly, it hasn't included all of the epic stories, all the stories of this period. So hopefully there will be an epic collection, volume 2 of Giant Man and the Wasp, of course. So this came out in 1964. It's a pretty old issue. So July 1964. And, well, I don't know how much it was in America. I assume at this point it was 12 cents. Yes, price was 12 cents. And this is on the trail of the Amazing Spider-Man. So you've got the Amazing Spider-Man there. And Stanley Dick Ayers. And I loved his artwork. I just absolutely fine. And this boldly inked by Paul Reinman and bravely lettered. And I must admit, lettering is always an important thing, because if you can't read it, what's the point of a comic? Okay, you look at visuals, but I think it's the lettering is great. And now, I never really felt that I got to know Giant Man particularly. He was a bit of an unusual character. The Wasp, yes, great character. And I was always a fan of the Winsome Wasp, as she was always called. Horrible way they did that. But to me, she was easily as good as any of the characters in Marvel. But sadly, they just didn't use her properly in the storylines, didn't give her own series, etc. I don't know, of course, if that would have survived. Who knows? When you actually go back and think about it, how many series were in the 60s or even into the 70s were female-based? Obviously, you ended up with like the She-Hulk and all those sort of Spider-Woman, but they were a lot later. Certainly during the 70s, 60s and early 70s, there were not many. Even some of the issues like the Cat, that only lasted 4 issues. So, but still. But the reason I mention about the Wasp is that this one does have a story at the back that's for the Wasp. The Egghead was a great villain. I mean, the guy was super intelligent. Why didn't he just use his intelligence instead of being a crook? He could have just used his intelligence to make vast amounts of money from bringing out vaccines and things and whatever. But no, he has to be a crook. That's basically, he was going, oh, this is my plans to do. Why? However, you wouldn't have a story, would you, if you didn't have that? However, he manipulates, how easy is that? Manipulates Giant Man. Oh, there's a message. Spider-Man's out to get you. That's really well done. And of course, the Wasp, everyone goes off, and she doesn't like Spider-Man. So you've got Spider-Man sort of, and she nearly kills him at this point. It's a great, and I always love seeing Spider-Man drawn by other people, obviously, because you've got, at this point, now 64, yeah, Ditko must have still been, certainly was, doing Spider-Man. And so it's really quite nice seeing a different one. Obviously, you've got Jack Kirby Spider-Man, but Dick Ayers Spider-Man, slightly different. Slight unusualness to the character. I always think it must have been quite an annoying one to draw because all that webbing. Must have taken forever to do webbing. I bet, why didn't we just create a character that didn't have webbing? No, it wouldn't have been so distinctive, I know, but it would have saved an awful lot of time. I mean, Giant Man's got a very basic uniform or costume. Now, you've got I love these adverts. So you've got this one, don't let them call you skinny, advises beautiful young actress Quinn O'Hara. Now, I have no idea, appearing in the Hall Barrett's The Caretakers, starring Robert Stack. I don't think I've ever seen that film. Ask for the amazing What On? What On? That sounds a terrible name, personally. But anyway, each their own, I guess. I've never heard of it. Obviously, it's an American product, so being in the UK, no idea. But you've got Spider-Man, some great scenes in this. I think it's just a great sort of battle scene, lots of webbing, of course, tying the Giant Man goes up and down, which is something sometimes he doesn't seem to use that much, I always felt, in the storylines. That was one criticism and I never really felt the Giant Man looked giant. Now, I've recently been reading the Elastigirl, I think that's, on Doom Patrol in the John Byrne omnibus. Wow, I mean, she looks enormous. I mean, you really feel that she is big. When you look at Giant Man, for some weird reason, even though we hear perceive, you can see him jumping on a police car, doesn't really ever feel the size, just the way, because if he actually literally bounced on that police car at that size, the police car would have been crushed. I mean, obviously, unless there was some weird thing that he didn't suddenly weigh more, because that was the problem with Giant Man. Did he weigh more or did he weigh less when he was... see, that was always the problem for me. So, However, it would have been interesting if suddenly he gained weight. But there's some great fight scenes, and it always is. Whenever you've got stories with the heroes, for some weird reason, virtually inevitable, they never meet up for a cup of coffee. They never go to the local cafe and just have a chat. Let's have a discussion. We're all both heroes here. Let's have a discussion. No, they go straight into the fight scenes. But then you wouldn't have a comic again, of course. And they're always good scenes. But again, the Wasp is brilliant here. I love the Wasp. The Wasp again is the great character, and I always got annoyed with the Wasp character, not personally towards the Wasp, but the fact is, why didn't they just allow her to be massive as well? She always small, which was good, but at times I thought, well, wouldn't she just turn around and say, you know what, I can be big as well? And there are times when you think it would have been useful. Sometimes small, sometimes big. Rapid sort of thing. And then I got really annoyed with the storylines when they sort of meant, oh, I can't do it because of the stresses and strains on the thing. Really? That was just such a feeble storyline. I really got I'm stuck at 12 foot or whatever. No, they should never. I love these stories, but some of the stories did make ridiculous. If you're going to have a guy that's big, have the stories when he's big. And again, I say, it was nice. I love the way that the Wasp hates Spidey. There's obviously that antagonism, and they never really developed that. I never felt, which would have been quite good. You could have had the Wasp turning up in Spider-Man. That would have been a great storyline where you could have Marvel team up with the Wasp. They should have done more of those. So where there was a sort of that hatred between them. Obviously there was hatred, or dislike, or problems, I should say, between the Human Torch and Spidey. But Spider-Man and the Wasp, it would have been a great sort of combo, and there could have been some possible stories they could have done, but never did, sadly. Now, the next one, this is the thing I like about this one, Tales to Astonish, is a voice in the dark. And that sort of gives it away what's going to happen. But Fighting Graham keeps the Wasp on the move, and you've got a horse dressed way there. And she's going out off through the streets, and she sees. But you've got the Wasp there. So this isn't. Now they did a couple of her own stories, and sadly, too few. Personally, I loved these ones at the end. I don't even know if they're collected. Even I must admit, I can't recall if they. I think they probably are in the Epic collection. I'm certainly must be. But it's. Again, Wasp definitely should have had her own series, frankly. That's my opinion. Probably wouldn't have sold a copy. I would have bought it. But again, this is one of the problems she's got here. She's got there's a manhole cover. Now, of course, if she had the ability to massively increase like Giant Man, she would have had the ability to, of course, lift things. And another problem, I always think, that with the atom sort of had the same strength. Well, at the end of the day, why can't she lift? Well, obviously at this point, she can't lift a man, which I find slightly unusual, because she would surely. This hunk of iron is much too heavy. No mere female could lift it unless she was a female Hulk, she says. But surely she would have been able to lift that. All the training, exercise. She was a member of the Avengers. She had a gym. She was pumping iron. I'm certain she would have been strong enough to pick up that thing, or she would have had some techniques that she could do those sort of things. But that didn't happen. But anyway, this one, I didn't say it was written by. Now, this is Jazzy Script and Art by Larry Lieber. It's got there. So you've got the Larry Lieber one there. And the art's also by Larry Lieber as well. So that's quite nice. So the art is, the art is fine. I think it's really good. You should have done more. Definitely done more. And inked by Chick Stone, who I always liked. I loved Chick Stone's inking. And I always loved the numbering as well. X661. That was X661. Now I wonder what, let's have a quick look. Just going back to the front. See, this one is X700 on here, X700. So this one was obviously done a little bit later than this one, quite a bit. But there's obviously there's 40 gap. So somehow this story, I assume, was done quite a way before the thing, as if the stories that were the usual backing stories, because they usually had sort of monster, horror, sort of science fiction, fantasy, and they obviously replaced, but then they put this in. So I wonder why they were doing. Would have been nice if they'd had a Wasp, but obviously, but I suppose distribution, because there was limits on how many comics they could distribute. But this is a good story, and I love the fact that it was all sort of with the. She used a certain something. I don't want to spoil the story, but it was quite a nice twist, and it gave an opportunity for a nice jokey end to the story. And these were only a couple of pages, 6 or 7 pages, but really absolutely fine artwork and a decent story. Nothing worse or better than like the Atom stories. And Atom was immensely popular. Now, if Gil Kane had been doing these, I'm certain it would have been immensely popular. So, now, one thing that's really odd in this one, and maybe, of course, at this point, they weren't doing so many of these, or maybe they just didn't bother with Tales to Astonish. There's no checklist, which is odd. Lots of scrawls and scribbles. Obviously, someone decided to scribble over. I always love that advert. There was always the advert for fishing rods. $12.95. Now, I don't know if that was good or not for a fishing rod. No idea. Likewise, He-Man, on the obviously other one as well. And also, How to Learn to Draw. So, Tales to Astonish. I love these old issues. And this one's very tatty, and you can pick them up reasonably cheap if they're in tatty condition. Of course, Tales to Astonish now, reasonably collectible. Probably not so much as Tales of Suspense, because of course that's got Iron Man, and obviously later on, of course, you had the Hulk and the Submariner. But the Giant Man ones I think are still great, and obviously these early stories when he was Ant-Man. So, and this one, of course, is great because it's got Spidey in. Well, what's better than having a good old Spidey story? Nice crossover story, and Giant. And the Wonderful Wasp. She wasn't called the Winston Wasp here. She was the Wonderful Wasp. Yeah, Spider-Man. Great little comic. Tales to Astonish, number 57.